There's something people don't tell you about heartbreak. It doesn't always end when the person leaves. Sometimes the pain lingers far longer than the relationship itself. You've deleted the photos, unfollowed their account, cleaned out the memories, and maybe even convinced your friends you're over it. But deep down, you're not. You're still haunted by the what ifs, still replaying the last conversation, still wondering what you did wrong, still waking up with that ache in your chest, the ache that reminds you something's missing, and you try to move on. You try to distract yourself, numb yourself, convince yourself you're better. But the truth, you're still heartbroken. And here's why. You didn't just lose a person. You lost a story, a version of your life you were invested in, a version where they were it. And what hurts most isn't just that they're gone. It's that the future you imagined with them is gone too. That's what heartbreak really is. It's grief, not just over what was, but over what never got the chance to be. So how do you fix it? You don't fix it by rushing into someone else's arms. You don't fix it by pretending you're fine. You fix it by facing it, by telling the truth to yourself without filters, without blame, without shame. You fix it by accepting that closure doesn't always come in the form of an apology or explanation. Sometimes closure is you choosing to stop reopening the same wound, choosing to stop trying to figure out what you could have done differently, and instead accepting that some endings aren't your fault. You fix it by reclaiming your worth from someone who couldn't see it, by reminding yourself that their inability to love you fully says more about them than it ever could about you. You fix it by doing the hardest thing of all, letting go of who they were, and even harder, letting go of who you were when you loved them. Because that version of you, the one who tried so hard to make it work, the one who bent until they almost broke, that version needs your forgiveness. Not your judgment, not your resentment, your forgiveness. And then you start rebuilding. Not in a rush, not to prove anything, but slowly, gently, intentionally. You take the pieces of yourself that were scattered in that love and you gather them back, piece by piece, until your wholeness no longer depends on someone else's presence. You build a life that makes your heart feel full again, not because someone else filled it, but because you did. And when you get there, when the memory no longer makes you ache, when you stop hoping they'll call, when you're no longer waiting to be chosen, that's when you've healed. That's when you realize the heartbreak didn't destroy you. It just introduced you to a stronger version of yourself you'd never met before. You're not just missing a person, you're grieving a story. Let's get real what you're feeling right now. It's not just about missing them. It's not just the late night texts, the way they made you laugh, or how they held your hand in a way that made the world feel quiet. It's deeper than that. You're not just heartbroken because they're gone. You're heartbroken because of what they represented. They were the lead character in a story you had already written in your head. The vacations you never got to take. The wedding that now only lives in your Pinterest board. The late night talks about future kids or dream homes. The Sunday mornings, the movie nights, the quiet routines. You didn't just lose a person, you lost the future version of yourself that existed with them. That's what no one tells you about heartbreak. It's grief. And not just grief for something that was real, but for something you hoped would be. And that kind of grief is silent. It's hard to explain to people because to the outside world, it looks like you're just hung up on an ex. But inside, you're mourning an entire life that now has no home. That's why letting go feels impossible sometimes. Because you're not just releasing a person, you're releasing a version of your identity that was tied to who you were when you loved them, and letting go of that version of you, that takes courage. But here's the truth, the future you imagined with them was never guaranteed. It was your vision, your hope, and maybe they played the part for a while, but they weren't committed to the same script. And that's not on you. It's just reality. And the moment you stop clinging to what could have been is the moment you free yourself to create something even better, something real. That vision you had for your future, that life of connection, joy, partnership, it's still possible. It's just not with them. And you have to be willing to take that vision off their shoulders. You have to stop thinking they were the only person capable of giving you what you dreamed of. You created that story, you imagined it, and if you could create it once with someone who wasn't right for you, imagine how powerful it's going to be when you finally meet someone who is. You're not crazy for feeling this way, you're human. And what you're grieving is sacred. But you don't have to stay stuck in a story that no longer fits your life. Mourn it, yes, but don't live there. Because the next chapter, it's waiting for you to pick up the pen, not someone else. Closure doesn't always come from them. One of the most painful myths we hold on to after a breakup is this, that we need them to give us closure. We think if they would just explain why they left, if they would just tell us we mattered, if they would just say sorry, then we could move on. But let's be honest, how often do those conversations actually heal you? Sometimes you do get the chance to talk. Sometimes they say all the right things. It's not you, it's me. I wasn't ready. You were amazing. I just couldn't give you what you deserve. And yet it still hurts, doesn't it? That's because closure isn't about answers. It's about acceptance. It's the moment you stop looking to them to make peace with your pain. It's when you decide that you are enough of a reason to move forward, that your healing doesn't depend on a text, a call, or an apology that may never come. See, when you place your healing in someone else's hands, you give them power they've already proven they don't know how to handle. You stay stuck in a story that's already over. You keep reopening a wound, hoping they'll be the one to close it. But what if you gave yourself permission to close it instead? What if you stopped needing to understand why they left and started focusing on why you stayed as long as you did? What if you stopped trying to decode their silence and started listening to your own voice? You don't need their words to validate your worth. You don't need their goodbye to begin your next hello. Closure comes when you stop waiting to be chosen by someone who walked away. When you realize that your peace is not a negotiation, it's a decision, one you get to make, not because they finally see your value, but because you do. And I get it, there's still that part of you that wants that one last conversation, that magical moment where they suddenly understand everything and maybe even ask for a second chance. But let's be real, if they couldn't show up fully while they had you, what makes you think they'll do it now that you're gone? You don't need closure from them. You need honesty with yourself. You need compassion. You need courage. Not for them to walk back into your life, but for you to walk forward into yours. So if you're sitting there waiting for the apology, waiting for the validation, waiting for the moment where it all makes sense, let this be your sign. You don't need it. You are allowed to move on even if they never explain why, because closure isn't something they give you. It's something you choose for yourself. Forgive the version of you that loved them. Let's talk about the version of you that showed up for that relationship. The one who gave their best. The one who tried harder than they ever had before. The one who believed in love, even when it wasn't being returned. The one who stayed, even when it hurt. That version of you didn't fail. They were brave. But I know what happens next. When it ends, you start questioning everything. How could I have been so blind? Why didn't I leave sooner? Why did I ignore the signs? You turn your heartbreak into a courtroom, and you're both the judge and the accused. And what do you do with that self-blame? You carry it quietly, daily, like a weight in your chest. But hear this, you can't heal if you're still punishing yourself. You're not broken because you loved someone who couldn't love you back. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you human. It means you believed in something. And belief, even when it doesn't end the way you hoped, isn't a flaw. It's a strength. So instead of asking what was wrong with me, start asking what was right with me that I was willing to give so much of my heart. Because love, even when it ends, reveals your depth. It shows you what you're capable of. And maybe you gave more than they deserved. Maybe you stayed longer than you should have. But that doesn't mean you were weak. It means you loved sincerely. And that version of you deserves grace, not judgment. You have to forgive them. The version of you that stayed. The one who kept hoping. The one who didn't walk away right away. That version of you thought love could win. They thought effort would fix it. They believed people could change. And maybe they were wrong, but they were doing the best they could with the information and emotional tools they had at the time. That version of you wasn't a mistake. They were a stepping stone. The more you resent that version of yourself, the more you disconnect from the wisdom you've gained. Because the truth is, your past self taught you everything you know now. They walked through fire so you could rise from the ashes. They stayed so you could learn when it's time to go. They hurt so you could heal. Forgive them, love them, thank them. And once you do, you'll stop dragging that version of you into every new relationship. You'll stop making decisions from guilt, fear, or regret. You'll start making them from clarity, strength, and self-worth. The person you were back then was trying to protect you. Now it's time for you to protect them by letting them rest. Let them be a chapter, not. You don't need to rewrite that story. You just need to accept it and move forward with a wiser pen. Your worth was never dependent on their ability to love you. Let's pause everything else for a second and get this straight. Your worth has never and will never be determined by how well someone else could love you. Because if someone couldn't see your value, it doesn't mean it wasn't there. It just means they weren't capable of recognizing it. Maybe they didn't know how to receive love. Maybe they were too broken to appreciate consistency. Maybe they were caught in their own chaos. But your worth, untouched, untarnished, unchanged. What breaks our heart isn't always the person. It's the story we tell ourselves about what their rejection means. We make it mean we're not good enough, not attractive enough, not exciting enough, not worth staying for. But that's not truth. That's a narrative built from wounds, not facts. Here's a truth most people never hear. Just because someone leaves doesn't mean something is wrong with you. Sometimes people walk away because they can't meet the depth you bring. And that's not your failure, it's their limit.
You could have done everything right. You could have loved them gently, spoken with honesty, supported them fiercely. But if they didn't have the emotional maturity or availability to meet you where you were, it still wouldn't have been enough. Not because you weren't enough, but because they couldn't receive enough of anything.
You are not responsible for someone else's emotional hunger. Stop twisting yourself into knots, wondering what you could have done differently. Stop replaying the last conversation, hoping to decode some hidden truth. You already have it. The way they treated you is all the clarity you need. Let this be the moment you stop handing your self-worth over to people who are still confused about their own. Let this be the moment you reclaim the truth. You are worthy of love that is steady, not shaky. Love that is curious about you, not confused by you. Love that leans in, not out. And if someone couldn't offer that, let them go. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. Because trying to convince someone of your worth is the fastest way to forget it yourself. Real love doesn't make you question your value. It makes you remember it. The right person won't need you to prove you're lovable. They'll already know, because they'll recognize the quiet strength behind your softness, the depth behind your care, the rare loyalty behind your effort. And when you see yourself through the eyes of someone who truly gets it, who mirrors the value you carry, you'll look back and realize you were never asking for too much.
You were just asking the wrong person.
And they weren't a measure of your value. They were a mirror showing you it's time to choose different. Because from now on, your worth is no longer a question. It's a standard. Healing is an intentional choice, not a passive process. Healing doesn't just happen. It doesn't show up unannounced one morning, wrap you in peace, and take the pain away while you sleep. It's not a gift. It's a decision, a process, and most importantly, a choice. You have to choose healing on the days you don't feel strong, on the mornings when you wake up with that ache in your chest, on the nights when the silence feels heavier than ever. You have to choose to move through it, because staying stuck, even when it's familiar, is a choice. Two, and let's be real, heartbreak has a sneaky way of disguising comfort. Replaying old memories might feel safe. Obsessively checking their social media might feel like staying connected. Telling yourself you'll never find someone like them might feel like honesty, but none of that is healing. Healing isn't passive. It doesn't wait for time to do all the work. Time passes whether you heal or not. Growth, however, requires effort. It requires you to face uncomfortable truths, to unlearn patterns, to sit with pain instead of running from it. You heal when you stop romanticizing the past and start grounding yourself in the present. You heal when you ask better questions. Not why did they leave, but why was I still holding on when they already had? Not what did I do wrong, but what have I learned from this pain that I refuse to ignore anymore? You heal by taking responsibility for your part, not by blaming yourself for theirs. And this doesn't mean rushing into toxic positivity or pretending everything is fine. Real healing gives you space to feel. It says, cry when you need to, journal when the words are messy, call someone who gets it, say no to people who don't, walk away from what triggers your wounds, and walk toward what waters your growth. Healing is built in choices. Choosing to stop chasing answers you won't get. Choosing to create boundaries that protect your heart. Choosing to believe that just because it ended doesn't mean love is over for you. Choosing to see yourself not as broken, but as becoming. And yes, healing is slow. Sometimes you'll feel like you've moved on, only to hear their name and feel like you're right back at day one. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're still human. But you are healing every time you show up for yourself, every time you don't text them, every time you choose your peace over your past. That's healing in motion. The scars may stay, but they won't sting forever. One day, they'll become reminders, not of the pain, but of the power it took to rise again. So no, healing isn't passive. It's work, but it's the kind of work that rebuilds you from the inside out and gives you back to yourself. The stronger you is on the other side of this. There's a version of you you haven't met yet, and they're waiting on the other side of this pain. Right now, you might not be able to see that version clearly. Maybe you're still waking up heavy, still hearing their name in your mind, still replaying that one moment, what you said, what they didn't, still trying to understand how something that felt so real could just end. But let me tell you something. Every broken piece you're carrying right now is not the end of you. It's the raw material for who you're becoming. The stronger version of you is being built right now, brick by brick, in the silence, in the loneliness, in the choices you make when no one else is watching. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like staying in when all your friends are out because you're not ready. Sometimes it's not replying to the text you know will undo all your progress. Sometimes it's taking a deep breath and saying, I don't understand this yet, but I will. That version of you, the one who's whole, who's grounded, who doesn't chase love but attracts it, is coming. And every time you choose not to settle, every time you choose your own peace over temporary comfort, every time you forgive yourself instead of criticizing yourself, you get one step closer to them. You see, this heartbreak didn't come to destroy you. It came to reveal you. Because we don't grow in comfort. We grow in discomfort, in disappointment, in loss. When the people we thought would stay don't, we learn to stand on our own. When the love we poured into others isn't returned, we learn to pour it back into ourselves. And that kind of growth, it doesn't disappear. It redefines you. You're not supposed to be the same person on the other side of this. That's the point. You're evolving. And with every painful step, you're gaining more than you're losing. You're gaining wisdom. You're gaining boundaries. You're gaining the ability to tell the difference between someone who genuinely cares and someone who only shows up when it's convenient. You're becoming someone who no longer begs to be chosen because you finally understand you are the prize. And one day soon, you'll look back at this moment, the tears, the confusion, the ache, and it won't sting the same way. It'll feel like a chapter, one that shaped you, one that taught you to trust yourself again. That's the version of you who's waiting on the other side. Not bitter, not guarded, just wiser, calmer, stronger. The kind of strong that doesn't scream, but silently knows, I made it through that. I can make it through anything.